Please listen carefully.
Welcome back to another episode of the Extra Buttery Podcast. This time on the show, we've got a lineup of some of the latest news from around the movie and TV industries, and we're very excited to bring you our first special guest to the show. A friend of ours from Jason and my days in the journalism program at Carleton University, Kate Wilkinson, will be joining us later on in the show. But to kick things off, we're going to be talking a little bit about some new shows on Amazon, some news from the upcoming Bond film. First news we've heard of the start date for the next Avatar film, and a little bit about Joss Whedon's new Batgirl film that he'll be bringing to the DC Extended Universe and who might be playing the lead role, as well as a little bit of talk about the upcoming Michael Mann film about Enzo Ferrari and the changing casting that's being planned for that film. And then we'll close things out with a little bit of discussion about some of our recent watching history, and I think Jason's going to be questioning some of my ratings on Letterboxd.com. But coming to you from Toronto, my name is Robert Snow, and joining me from Vancouver is my co-host Jason Chen. Hey Jason, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. So you've been keeping a close eye on Amazon lately. We were talking in a recent episode about what we should really call companies like Netflix and Amazon, because they're really moving beyond distribution networks and into full-on studios now.
Yeah, that's true. So I think the term we used was alternative studios, but I feel like we could come up with a way better name. That'll come, I'm sure. But the biggest news is two things. So Nicholas Refn Winding, who did Drive, which was one of my favorite Ryan Gosling films of all time, has cast Miles Teller in a 10-episode series called Too Old to Die Young. And the other thing is Amazon is producing their own movie, this time with Brie Larson. It's based on a true story. A woman called Victoria Woodhull, who was the first woman to run for the president of the United States in 1872. And it's really interesting that Amazon is really a full court press from Amazon to produce all sorts of different shows and different movies. Exactly how big and what kind of budget we're looking at, I'm not sure, because Refn Winding has always worked with a pretty small budget. And this film with Amazon Studios with Brie Larson, I think there's some risk to it. But I don't know. I think it should be a really, really interesting time for Amazon. I mean, this is their big foray into creating their own content.
Yeah, because they're up against Netflix as their major competitor. And Netflix has been getting bolder and bolder in recent months. In fact, it seems like every time you log on to the platform now, there's some new surprising thing. I think even just as recently as this past weekend, I came across this really cool documentary series about classic movie directors who contributed to the war effort in World War II, and that was
that's cool.
Yeah, it's called Five Came Back, and it's a 3-part documentary series. And
I've heard about
and
this,
I had no idea it was even in production, but it popped up on Netflix, and so I think Amazon has got they're probably looking at that ecosystem and thinking to themselves, hey, we've got to punch just as hard as Netflix is on this front. I'm curious to see how Nicholas Winding Refn adapts to the Amazon experience. We know that he has worked on, as you said, like pretty small budgets before, kind of grinding out these very artsy, very European themed movies.
Definitely.
And hopefully the Amazon experience is he finds that kind of welcoming, because I've always been curious about what he calls his filmmaking from the future, as he described the Neon Demon. He's always positioned himself as being a guy who's trying to make movies as if he's a guy working 5 years from now.
All these crazy European artists, man.
Yeah. So what do we know anything about the Miles Teller series that he's working on? Do we have any plot outlines right now?
I don't think so, but I know it's 10 episodes, and it's going to be a crime series. and it's going to be executively produced by Teller and Refn Winding. It is written by Ed Brubaker, who I believe is a comic book writer, and he also wrote episodes for HBO's Westworld.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so there's lots of great talent in the mix there.
Yeah, exactly. So this is interesting. Miles Teller is his career so far is pretty interesting. I think he's kind of like Colin Farrell in the sense that he plays really good, kind of off the wall niche characters. He's not a leading man by any stretch. I think Fantastic Four kind of nailed that.
Yeah, but he seems to be kind of coming to that point in his career a little bit sooner than Farrell did.
Yeah, definitely. I think it might be just a lack of opportunity, because from what I hear, Miles Teller is kind of difficult to work with.
Yeah, there was that. Was it a GQ piece about him where they kind of tried to make this? They tried to like get out ahead of the story and
he tries to sound cool.
Yeah, they tried to frame him as like being a dick, as if like that was cool, but
he just comes off as douchey. He doesn't come off like cool or anything like that.
Yeah, I remember there was some controversy about that profile because he was trying to make it sound like he was trying to change the story after it came out or something. But setting aside Amazon for a second, let's jump into this latest story about the upcoming 25th Bond film.
Yeah, it appears Daniel Craig is returning. A lot of people have joked that Daniel Craig is only doing this for the money, which I guess is fair. But the other wrinkle is that Barbara Broccoli was the main person who produced the Othello Broadway play that he starred in. And apparently he loved it and it got pretty good reviews. And I think she might have produced this Othello production just to grease the wheels a little bit and, maybe persuade Daniel Craig to come back as Bond. Because right now, I kind of in agreement that there's no heir apparent to the Bond throne. Like, I can't think of anyone who could really take on that role right away.
Because there's always names being knocked around, but yeah, nobody's super definitive, and all the stuff that came out of the Spectre press tour, it was a lot of people just kind of dogpiling on Craig for either, they were trying to get him to commit to the next film, right as he'd finished the previous one, and he was like creatively drained, and he gave all these press clips that made it sound like he hated playing the character and all this stuff.
Creatively drained is a funny way to put it, because there was nothing creative about Spectre at all. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing about it was creative.
But that was kind of the impression he was giving. But so I can see why like Barbara Broccoli would kind of look at that situation and be like, what can I do to make him feel a little bit better and give him like something to focus on while we gear up for the next Bond film.
He's such a curmudgeon sometimes, like he's always this, I hate this and I hate that. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to have that much money to play Bond? Okay.
I think he's kind of in that phase of his career. He's a little bit like Robert Downey Jr. in the sense that, they have this landmark character that they're responsible for, and the fans want to see more of it just because, they love that portrayal. But sometimes you have to question why the actor is actually in it. And in Downey Jr.'s case with the Iron Man character, he's really just trying to build up a lot of capital to finance his own production company. And I wonder whether Craig has got something like that in the works as well. Like maybe he's thinking to himself he can get a production company off the ground and maybe even consider directing or something in the next 5 or 10 years. Maybe.
I thought actually the funniest part of the story was someone had, I guess, asked Barbara Broccoli what she thought of Tom Hiddleston as potentially the next Bond. And she said, quote unquote, he's too smug. And I thought that was so spot on and so accurate and so funny, because I do find Tom Hiddleston rather smug. I don't think he can play a good Bond at all.
Well, I mean, he had been in that AMC, was it an AMC show, The Night Manager, based on the John le Carré novel? And everyone was looking at that. They're like, oh, wow, Tom Hiddleston can play a spy. But the character he plays in The Night Manager is not a Bond.
Yeah.
He's not this kind of, this suave.
It's not the same character. It's kind of like how Smiley from Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy would not be a good Bond.
No, yeah. Incredibly different, yeah. At this point, can't see anything suggesting that Craig will just flip the table and run away from this. This may very well be his last time in the role, but if that's the case, then I hope that the writers they've got on board will kind of draft some sort of suitable conclusion. Even though it seemed like Spectre did a lot of work to try to put an ending on the arc that had started with Casino Royale.
The one pitfall too is, and I kind of felt the same way about Skyfall, is that this is not a landmark film, but this is an anniversary film. It'll be his 25th film, right? Daniel Craig's Bond since Quantum of Solace kind of has been quite self-referential and kind of done a lot of Easter eggs and nudged its own history, or given nudges to its own history quite a bit. And I hope they don't go overboard with this 25th film.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of that out of their system with the 50th anniversary of the series as a whole, I think.
You hope so.
You hope so, but you know that the Broccolis are going to try to play up that side of it for marketing purposes. That's just good business sense.
Of course, they have to. Speaking of good business sense, Avatar 2 has been greenlit, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. All we have on this front right now is just some interview material with Sigourney Weaver. I believe someone caught up with her at the red carpet for another project, and she revealed that she's planning to start production on this in the fall of this year. That would sort of line up with what we have in terms of the most recent release date for Avatar 2, which was pushed back to 2019.
How long did it take for them to make the first one?
A number of years. They because Cameron loves to build up his pretty little sandbox world, and nothing.
Yeah.
He invests so much time and money into creating this perfect little place where he controls everything. That just takes a lot of time for the visual artists to actually create.
Right. And wasn't like the thing about Avatar, like the first time he had introduced some revolutionary 3D technology or something like that?
Oh yeah, because the first Avatar was right on the bleeding edge of the 3D movie revolution. Like the era of 3D movies that we're still kind of living in was.
It should just die. The 3D era should just die.
I mean, it's lost a lot of momentum, I would say, in the past year or two. Like you're seeing fewer and fewer movies with 3D screenings at multiplexes.
Because they suck.
Yeah, it's just not generating, like, people don't get excited about it, and the tech in most ways the tech really doesn't impress in the way that it did back in when Avatar came out.
And also, it adds nothing to the story. Like, just because a film with 3D doesn't make it any good. Sometimes it even makes it worse.
No, but I mean, unfortunately, Cameron belongs to this small school of directors, which also includes people like Peter Jackson and George Lucas too, but even though he doesn't make movies anymore, where like they put all of their faith in some fancy new tech, and they convince themselves that the tech is enhancing the storytelling, but it really doesn't bear itself out with the audiences, I don't think.
Yeah, so Avatar 2, it has to be careful that it needs a really strong story to work, because the story was obviously not the best aspect of the first Avatar movie. In fact, I thought the story was probably the weakest.
Oh yeah,
part.
That's always been the weak, like the part of that first film that gets criticized the most. And Sigourney Weaver in her interview clip said that she loves the scripts. She was talking it up as if they were totally fantastic.
Well,
now,
of course she's going to say that.
Of course she, contractual obligations and all of that. But this film doesn't benefit from the same kind of excitement value as the first one, in the sense that, like, it's hitting at a point pretty much like 10 years after the first one, when everyone's already knows what to expect from a 3D film, from a film with $300 million worth of effects budget. So it's, to your point, like the scripts have better really improve on the first one to hold audiences, because Cameron is just trying to get 5 films out of this now. He's apparently trying to shoot at least a bunch of these ones back to back to back, and
it'll help save money that way too.
It'll save him money, but like he's gonna hope that each one still makes like $1 billion to make back what's probably a huge investment.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair to Cameron, he did do one of the best jobs ever with Terminator 2.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe there's some hope for the sequel. I mean, I didn't like Avatar at all, so I'm not too keen. But I mean, we'll see where it goes. It's a very interesting project for sure.
It's going to be one of those things like, is it going to spawn the massive shared universe that Cameron is hoping for with all the tie-ins, or is it going to, is the bubble finally going to burst on the quote-unquote king of the world label that he he earned all those years ago?
Speaking of new projects, what about Joss Whedon and his new Batgirl adventure, huh? That's pretty funny. So he does the Avengers, didn't turn out so well for him on, I think, a personal level, and then he basically crosses the parking lot and goes to DC.
It is a little bit of an odd choice. I mean, I get that he feels comfortable in the comic book world. Like, I mean, that's always been his thing. But
Yeah.
if we're talking about making movies with creative control being the issue, and he felt that he was too boxed in with the MCU. I don't think he's making that good of a trade for the DCEU.
Yeah, he has to answer to Zack Snyder now.
Yeah, if anything, the DCEU has been even more poorly managed than the MCU, and or there's more tensions behind the scenes or something, because you just look what we've gotten so far.
We'll find out with Wonder Woman too.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what inspired this change, other than maybe he has a lot of faith in the script that he's got.
They have a script already?
Oh well, if it hasn't been written, then maybe they've at least chosen a writer. But the process now is just like coming up with the star, and there's been a few of the movie sites have been drafting lists of possible lead actresses. Do any of the ones that you've seen like really jump out to you though?
I was thinking Rachel Keller the other day would be a good choice, but I'm always so wary of fan casting these things, because I always feel like the perfect girl who plays a perfect Batgirl has probably yet to be discovered. And so, I mean, there are quite a few names that have been sort of bandied around, but
even though the chances of her taking the role are might be pretty thin, I do like the idea of Britt Robertson in the role. She just has she has the right vibe of like, she can pull off the action if she needs to, but she's also got a bit of a brainier kind of vibe in some of her previous roles. So
yeah, and I was just gonna say too, Joss Whedon has a reputation for crafting strong female characters, which I kind of disagree with, but that's the rep he has. And it'll be interesting to see where he takes this, because I don't know if you saw the animated version of The Killing Joke.
But I think I know where you're going with it, yeah.
Yeah, the part where Batgirl is basically like a side piece. She ends up having sex with Batman, which is like the oddest thing ever.
Yep.
And I think the whole treatment of her character turned a lot of people off. And maybe this is DC kind of going, well, you know what? We made a mistake, but here's also a chance to capitalize on the huge popularity of Batgirl. Mackenzie Davis, I think, would be, pretty solid choice.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see her break out with a big role like this.
Yeah, exactly. Jane Levy, some people have mentioned. I think she might be good. Micah Monroe, I know you're a fan.
She was really good in The Guest. I liked her in that.
Yeah, I mean, it could go so many different ways. I'm always wary of casting a person in a role before we even know what that role entails, because there's different interpretations of Batgirl.
Absolutely, and the version that they might go with, it's going to be informed a little bit by what we've already seen in the DCEU. So she could be like an older version of Batgirl who has been healed from her paralysis caused by the Joker.
Yeah, she's got a tragic character history.
Yeah, or maybe they're going to be looking to cast a younger Batgirl for the current version of Batman played by Ben Affleck, and we won't actually see the incident with the Joker from The Killing Joke.
Yeah, I mean, it's all possible. It's actually, I'm probably more excited for this project than Wonder Woman. Maybe because I already kind of heard that Wonder Woman isn't going to be good. But Batgirl, to me, has always been a much more interesting character.
Yeah, and she does, if they follow the general arc from the comics, she also kind of plays a bit of a unifying role in the larger universe.
Yeah, she totally does. Yeah, she does.
You know, if they go the Oracle route, then she ends up being this kind of linchpin of the Batman team, and you could see her doing cameos in some of the non-Batman DC films if they went that way.
Yeah. So, and it's up to DC to not screw this up. Hopefully, they don't screw it up.
I mean, what happens if they decide to go in the direction of the animated Killing Joke just for just to see hey, how gritty can we make this?
That was such a horrific effort on so many levels. Like, I watched it and I felt so dirty in a sense for watching it because I didn't enjoy it at all. And there were too many things in there that made me go like, why the hell would these characters do such things? It makes no sense.
There's been that long time thing about how Batman takes these younger people under his wing to mentor them and point them in the right direction.
But not to have sex with them.
Yeah, I mean, people joke about it or there's fan fictions written about it, but that stuff is for like the dark corners of the internet. I don't like to actually see it realized in an official DC product. It does make you kind of squirmy, I think. And
the animation wasn't
no,
good
they
either.
went with a pretty cheap looking art style.
It was kind of a mix of anime and a mix of North American animation, but for whatever reason, it just didn't work with the source material. Anyway, moving on to another casting choice. So I'm a huge Michael Mann fan, as you know, and his newest project is going to be about Enzo Ferrari, which was going to be played by Christian Bale, but apparently has been replaced by Hugh Jackman.
I remember when Michael Mann first started talking about this project. I think it was about 2 years ago, and Christian Bale was kind of part of that from the beginning. Like they kind of wanted him to do it, but he was concerned apparently that he couldn't gain enough weight to convincingly play the character the way he wanted to play him, and
which is funny. Because he grew so much for Batman Begins. Like, he was a freaking fire hydrant in Batman Begins.
But that's always been his thing, right? Like, he's one of those actors who feels that the body weight is a really important way to sketch out the character.
Well, just changing your physique, right?
So apparently he didn't feel like doing this for the Ferrari movie was going to be safe. So now he's kind of backed out, and Hugh Jackman's up. I mean, is Hugh Jackman a good fit for the role? He looks a little bit more like Enzo Ferrari than Christian Bale does.
Why can't we find a fat Italian dude? Is it that hard?
And I don't think Hugh Jackman would like let himself go in the way that Christian Bale would.
Well, I don't know. He's a pretty committed actor. I don't know if they can pull off convincing Italians. Like, Enzo Ferrari is very Italian, right?
Yeah, all the photos I've seen of him are,
Yeah, he's got the dark shades on. And he's kind of round and pudgy. I'm always a little wary of actors playing people from other countries, but speak English and then use an accent to sort of cover up, or just use an accent to signal where they're from. Because I feel like, you know what? Why can't they just speak Italian? Find some Italian dude and put some subtitles on the screen, Like, I don't mind subtitles in movies at all. I know some people do, but it's just weird.
Of course, that's falling on that kind of intersection between the art and the finance, right? Because you can't sell an expensive biopic without a major star.
That's part of Hollywood's problem too, yeah.
But there are major stars with Italian heritage, so...
Yeah, who's that guy who played the main character, Giuseppe, in A Beautiful Life? Roberto Benigni? Yeah, like, couldn't he play Enzo Ferrari? Like, he already kind of looks like him.
Would you believe Roberto Benigni as Enzo Ferrari? Like, Enzo Ferrari is like famously kind of mercurial.
More so than Hugh Jackman or Christian Bale.
Yeah, but Roberto Benigni is like a latter day Charlie Chaplin. Like, he's so bright and like energetic and clown. Like he's like a 21st century clown, and
true, but
not in a bad way. But I don't think even though he is Italian, I don't think I'd believe him as much as I would like like an American actor or something.
But see, this is what they said about Jim Carrey too when he tried to go like for the serious dramas, and I thought he did wonderful job. But people just didn't take him seriously because the Jim Carrey they know is the Ace Ventura Jim Carrey. You know? The guy who, like,
right,
talks out of his butt. You know?
Yeah. So I don't think the rest of the cast has really been filled out yet on this Ferrari film. So
no.
But yeah, I'll be keeping an eye on this one, especially with the background of like Christian Bale being close to doing it, but then, you know, letting that health thing be the decider is kind of compelling. But yeah, that about does it for the news in this episode. So we're gonna take a quick break, and when we come back, it'll be our feature interview with our special guest, Kate Wilkinson. Welcome back to the Extra Buttery Podcast. This week on the show, we've got a special guest. It's a friend of Jason and myself. We went to school with her, a journalism school at Carleton in Ottawa, and she's here with a bit of a contentious point to argue. It's got to do with Quentin Tarantino and one of his films from the midpoint of his filmography, and she's going to argue that this movie is actually what would you say, like the least understood or the secret success of his oeuvre? Let me welcome Kate Wilkinson to the show. Here's Kate. How's it going?
Hello. What would we say? So this conversation came about because we go to movies a lot. Well, you go to way more movies. You're the person that gets me out of the house going to movies more often than, you know, just waiting for them to come out on Netflix. So we were at, I don't know, one of our recent movie outings, and I had just come across an article that made me so angry because it was Quentin Tarantino talking about his half of Grindhouse from back in 2007, which is Death Proof, starring Kurt Russell, Zoe Bell, people like Rosario Dawson, and he basically called it the worst movie he's ever made. And that made me so mad because I think it's one of the best movies that he's ever made. And so we kind of thought that would be a fun topic to start to dive into.
Absolutely. But like maybe for the people who are listening who either, you know, they saw the movie a really long time ago, they can't remember it, or people who just managed to miss it in some way, can you give us a quick little plot synopsis?
A rundown?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so in Death Proof, so one thing to remember is that it's the back half of Grindhouse, which is the two-part exploitation film extravaganza that Quentin Tarantino directed with Robert Rodriguez. The back half is basically the story of this killer stuntman named Stuntman Mike, played by Kurt Russell. The first half of the movie, we meet a group of awesome girls. We see Jungle Julia, Shanna, and I can't remember the third girl's name, played by Vanessa Ferlito, but they're basically played by Sidney Poitier, Jordan Ladd, and Vanessa Ferlito. Three girls hanging out in Austin, Texas. But meanwhile, they're actually being stalked by the killer stuntman Mike in his old stuntman car. It's got a roll cage in it, a skull on the hood. And, you know, we know he's creepy from the outset, but we don't know exactly what he's capable of until halfway through the movie when he actually manages to murder a number of women, including Rose McGowan's character, with his car. So it kind of has elements of a slasher flick. And, you know, it's heartbreaking. We get to know these women really well, and then he kills them in a very brutal way. But in the second half of the movie, we meet another set of girls, a parallel sort of foursome. The fourth girl in the original group being a character named Lena Frank, who's actually their weed dealer, meets them at Guero's bar later on. But yeah, we meet four new women, awesome actresses. Mary Elizabeth Winstead is playing an actress, actually, who's starring as a cheerleader.
I love Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
The other person is Tracy Toms, who a lot of people know from Rent. We've got Rosario Dawson, who plays Abby, and we've got Zoe Bell, who plays herself as a stunt woman. And basically the four friends are all working on a movie set together in Tennessee. So Abby is a makeup artist. Tracy, who plays Kim, and Zoe are both stunt women. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead, as I said, is playing a cheerleader. It turns out that Zoe and Kim, not only are they stunt women, but they're also stunt movie enthusiasts. And they refer to this classic 1970s stunt movie called Vanishing Point. Zoe's in America, and she's actually taken out a print subscription to a local newspaper. And she finds that there's a 1970 white Dodge Charger for sale in the area because she's been looking at the classifieds. So the girls go to this farm where there's this super creepy farmer, and they basically, by leaving Lee, the cheerleader, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, behind, are able to convince this guy to let them take the car out for a test drive, is what they tell him.
Right.
It turns out that what Zoe and Kim really want to do, Abby's not really sure what's happening until it's happening, is play a game called Ship's Mast, which basically means that Zoe Bell, from what I understand, she did all of these stunts, which is freaking bananas. She is holding 2 belts, which has like gloves on, and she's riding on the hood of a car at like top speed.
Yeah.
And that is when stuntman Mike finds the girls and starts to wreak havoc with them as well. And the 3 women decide to get vengeance on stuntman Mike. As a young, I think I was 18 when I saw this movie. I had just recently got into Quentin Tarantino because of a boyfriend at the time, actually.
Oh, okay.
He'd been showing me all of Tarantino's movies. I was like a new Tarantino fan. And basically, I just thought this was one of the greatest things I've ever seen. In saying it's the worst movie he ever made, Tarantino doesn't realize how important it was to put characters like this on screen. There's a reason why Bella in Twilight is such a disappointing heroine and why Katniss Everdeen isn't. You know, when you have women who have full lives, who talk about things other than men and their relationships with men, which is what the women in Death Proof do throughout the movie, it's still, so many movies don't pass the Bechdel test, and this one does, and it's freaking awesome. It's got all the classic Tarantino elements, like so much dialogue, so many pop culture references. The women are awesome, just like Uma Thurman and Kill Bill and Daryl Hannah. You know, it's just such an important part of his canon, and for him to dismiss it like he did.
Do you remember what he said about the movie when he kind of dissed it?
Because I think you were explaining it to me. Yeah.
Well, it was just that, you know, he had done this Hollywood Reporter roundtable, and he started talking about other directors who had had really strong careers, but then they had, for one reason or another, they'd put out a movie that really wasn't that great. And it, in his view, that one bad film really negatively impacted their reputations. So he's worried that Death Proof is like that for him, where
But what's ironic is that the interview we're talking about is 2012. The Django Unchained came out in 2012.
Yeah.
So he doesn't think that Django Unchained is his worst movie, because it is.
Yeah.
It is. It's funny because a lot of people love Django Unchained. I really didn't. And for a long time, I was trying to figure out exactly why I hated it so much. To me, it just wasn't enough, you know. There was a lot of buildup, especially after Inglourious Basterds. Like, he went for it, you know. He killed Hitler in Inglourious Basterds. If you're going to go back and rewrite slavery, you need to do it big. Yeah. And for me, you know, one plantation, if you're going to go back and rewrite history, I want the whole frickin' Confederacy, like, burned to the ground. I don't just want one plantation going up in smoke. Having read some really great posts about it, Jesse Williams, he has this insanely long blog post about it from, I think it was like 2013 or 2014 he must have posted it, and it's like a scene-by-scene takedown of why the imagery of Django Unchained is so wrong. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that he made Django a weirdly comical character. It was inappropriate, you know, it had to be more than that. And the person who really kind of solidified my viewpoint after I read her work there's a film blogger by the name of Eileen Jones. I read her post about getting excited about the fact that Django Unchained was coming out, and then just the utter disappointment after she saw the film. And that really, her opinion really influenced my own when it came to deciding if I liked that film or not. So if you have a chance to check out Eileen Jones or Jesse Williams or any of the other great essays about Django Unchained, I think you too will be convinced as to why that's not his best movie. Definitely, I think it's his worst movie. And so when put in the context of his canon, Death Proof is by far not the worst one. Like, he's made other bad films. Not to mention that his section of 4 Rooms is horrendous.
Yeah, and I've never even seen that,
that
contribution.
We won't even get into that one. But
Yeah. Yeah, it's his. I don't know what sort of headspace he was in when he was giving that roundtable. He was also probably a little bit fired up because if I remember correctly, he was also launching into this. One of his key talking points, or the thing that he always returns to, is how terrible digital cinema is compared to movies shot on film. Like
this
on
is his
celluloid.
constant crusade: is film versus digital.
Yeah, and to an extent, I sort of see where he's coming from because. He did actually put up the money, and I think he still operates the famous New Beverly Theater in Los Angeles. So he's kept that little bit of movie history alive. But he's always talking in interviews or these roundtable type gatherings about how digital cinema is inherently worse than celluloid. That somehow it's TV in public,
And he doesn't like TV, I'm assuming.
He doesn't like, apparently. Has he not heard of peak TV? Like, what's going on?
We're in the golden age of television,
Exactly.
Quentin.
Yeah. Now, he might be unfairly lumping in, like, all of the big superhero blockbuster franchise movies in that, like, in his takedown of digital cinema. That may be why he's so angry about it.
Hey, if the Green Lantern, not good.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah. But I think he's sort of romanticizing something that doesn't really need to be romanticized in quite the amount that he does.
Well, and we know how much he loves nostalgia. What I remember correctly about Grindhouse from the time it was released is the press tour that they went on. They had to do a lot of explanation for audiences, like modern audiences, who just couldn't understand why someone would put the mistakes back in.
Right.
And Tarantino, it's funny that he likes sort of anachronisms and old ways of doing things, because as a filmmaker, I wonder if he would be as popular as he is without the internet. The fact that rewatching a Tarantino film is just as fun as watching it for the first time because of all the references, and the fact that you can pick things apart, and there's fan chat areas like on IMDb and like the trivia section of IMDb where and Rotten Tomatoes, where fans just get to talk back and forth about, did you catch this reference? Like, here's a full guide to all the references in Tarantino movies. They're so much more fun on rewatching. Mm-hmm. It's funny that someone who likes and preaches so much about old ways of making movies, I think, is pretty reliant on the internet for his fan base, because that's really where I think a love for Tarantino develops, is when you're able to, be part of a community that talks about his stuff and explains it to each other. And it's funny though, like I just don't agree that film is more beautiful. I mean, surely The Revenant was shot on digital.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Like, how can you say a beautiful movie like that isn't comparable to things that have been put on film?
Exactly. And in that case, Alejandro Inarritu, not only did he shoot on digital, but I'm almost positive that it was shot chronologically.
Whoa!
So he,
he's like a stickler for...
Yeah, if the characters had to, like, backtrack through a particular part of the location multiple days later, then that's what he would do, whereas traditional productions will group everything
by
scene, trying to get everything in a particular location and then moving on. Inarritu wanted to spend the money and cart the equipment and do everything in the midst of, like, Canadian winter.
Well, that movie got really delayed and expensive, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But that was him committing to it, and for Tarantino to imply that somehow that effort on the part of a director like Inarritu is less cinematic or less legitimate because he might have used more modern shooting techniques, that kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah. Come on, man. Yeah. You're not the only one who has claim to legitimate director status.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not to say I don't love you, Quentin, because I do. I just need you to stop putting down Death Proof.
Do you feel that, despite the fact that he has so many strong women in his movies, that occasionally he goes too far and it ends up being like a fetish of his, and that somehow that might undercut what he's trying to do by having a strong female character?
Well, I mean, in Death Proof, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of disembodied feet and legs. Like, you can definitely tell that the guy has put his love of that part of the female anatomy out there. Like, when the movie opens, there's a pair of female feet in flip-flops, like, tapping on the dashboard.
Right.
And the titles go up. Jungle Julia's leg is literally severed from her, and it gets like its own shot when it falls on the pavement during the grotesque scene. But you know what's interesting is that stuntman Mike also has a foot fetish. He goes after Rosario Dawson's feet in his first kind of meeting of the girls. She doesn't know it's him, but it does creep her out. Well, she knows it's him, but she doesn't know that he like has been like licking her feet essentially.
Oh, okay.
Which is it's super gross. There's hints throughout the movie that stuntman Mike A isn't like attractive to women, is B very insecure about it. Rose McGowan's character, I think the whole reason, well, maybe not the whole reason, I think he was going to kill her anyway, but I think he especially enjoyed it because she told all the girls at the bar that she wasn't going to sleep with him, and he overheard it. So it's interesting that, Quentin Tarantino definitely has his fetishes, feet all over the place, ankles all over the place, Kill Bill, trying to get her feet to work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in a weird way, he kind of puts those on screen and then kills the character who has the same fetishes.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that's some sort of symbol that he's putting out there. I suppose maybe he does it under the guise of it being based on exploitation narrative. There's still a lot of really important stuff happening, though, in the back half of Death Proof, where you have fully realized female characters having full conversation, strong women having relationships and a friendship beyond just their relationships with men. Like there's a little bit of like boy talk, who they're dating, that kind of thing.
Right.
But there's a lot more about female friendship itself. I think it was an interview that he was doing on Late Night with Conan, where he said that if he's going to be hanging out in a group of people, it's usually with women. And I think that if that's the case, I think that that's had a positive impact on his filmmaking in the case of Death Proof, because the conversations are very natural between the women. They tease each other, they make fun of each other, they tell stories, they reminisce, they have adventures, they have plans, and it's not always revolving around the men in their lives.
Right.
We don't even find out until partway through the movie that Abby is a mom. And the guy, the father isn't around, but like Abby's a single mom, that kind of thing. I don't know, there's just some very like realistic characters in Death Proof that for me kind of makes up for the fact that there's some fetishization happening. Right. Not to cancel it out, but
okay. Well, and that's why I think it's a little bit ironic that he likes to make these movies in the style of the exploitation genre, which in its cruder formats back in the 70s when it was really popular, that genre was fueled by women in revealing clothing, getting knocked around, just being depicted as objects. It is interesting how in his version of that, he kind of uses that as fuel, but then he takes it a little bit further and develops it into something weirdly like empowering.
Well, I think I don't know, empowering is such a loaded word these days because everyone's using it, but I think it's feminist. And maybe those two things are interchangeable in a lot of people's minds. I don't know. It's a word that's been so, like, bastardized by by marketing that it's hard to know what empowerment really is anymore.
Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus, not empowering whatsoever. And the other interesting thing is these women make a big deal of not being dependent on men. Even the women in the first half of the movie, Jungle Julia, makes a point of the fact that the guys that they've been hanging out with recently, she's not going to get her weed from them. She's going to get it from a female weed dealer friend because she doesn't want to be dependent on these guys all night. She doesn't want them following him around.
Right.
They ultimately decide not to take the boys up with them to the lake house. It's a girls' weekend. I think to really make the point of why Stuntman Mike deserves it in the end, you need the first half of the movie where he manages to do something truly horrible to 5 women. It makes it really feel like he deserves it when he gets the shit kicked out of him by the second half of Girls.
Yeah.
So, can I also say that their wardrobe, totally normal and natural, and I don't see it exploitative at all. Those outfits for all the women, I think, were totally normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the fact that you've decided to sort of defend Death Proof or maybe rise it up above his own appraisal of it is that I think a lot of people have, especially since his most recent movie, The Hateful Eight, came out, there's been some people kind of taking another look over Tarantino and maybe thinking that he's going too far or that he's overstating some of the things that maybe were better balanced around the time that he made Death Proof or Inglourious Bastards, or maybe even a little bit further back to Kill Bill. You haven't seen the Hateful Eight.
I haven't.
Yeah, we talked about this before.
Yeah,
so.
I disliked Django Unchained so much that when I saw he was coming out with another Western, I was like, oh, not again.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this again.
And then there's this scene in the Hateful Eight towards the end. It's the big climactic shootout, and the violence in that, or the extremity of the violence, probably, in my opinion, it goes like it's probably twice as bad as the final scene in Django Unchained. Just the sheer level of like this character's head, it completely explodes. Bits of brain and skull and blood just go all over this other person. This character who gets coated in it. Her teeth have already been knocked out in an earlier scene, and meanwhile she's just cackling like she's possessed by some sort of demon. And the movie plays this up for some sort of shock value. It's like, look at this, like, look how crazy these people are. But I ended up feeling like by that point I've been kind of deadened to it, and it didn't have the effect that he probably wanted it to have.
It is funny to think that the feminism. I mean, if you got a female character who's getting more than she deserves in Hateful Eight, I wonder if there's like a happy accident happening with Death Proof. Like, does he even know the symbolism? I think he was trying to do a whole lot in Django Unchained with symbolism and politics and. An anti-slavery message, but I think whether he meant to or not, if a viewer like me can find importance in it, I don't know. I think that it was just a really interesting message that he gave to all the young women who would have seen that movie around that time.
Yeah. And is that something you would...
It made me expect more of female heroines. It's why, I think, coming back to an earlier point, it's why Bella in Twilight was so disappointing. It came out after... I think Katniss Everdeen was like an expectation. All we were really getting around that time was like, I was thinking like, why can't a woman be in The Bourne Identity? We were getting like that shitty movie Salt starring Angelina Jolie. Like, like there was just not enough in terms of female action characters. And so, those, I think they're still rare. When you think about a big marquee movie, a movie like that I think is still important. You might find a better female relationship depiction in independent movies, but when it comes to something that's big on screen, it's still rare to get those kinds of female friendships depicted and portrayed. And females as action heroines. Zoe Bell, why doesn't that woman have her own franchise? Yeah, and seriously. You think about, as possible. She can actually do the stuff. Yeah, exactly. Vin Diesel can't do the stuff, I don't think. But maybe what was happening in Death Proof was actually like a really early prototype of what we've been seeing just as recently as like 2015 with Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah. Because what she does in that, a lot of those stunts are actually her like hanging off of a giant big rig while it's trucking through the Namibian desert while they're shooting this movie. That's really her. And actually, she's coming out with a movie in August called Atomic Blonde, and it's set. I already love it. If you haven't seen the trailer for this, we have to look at it when we finish recording because. And just so that we avoid disappointment, she's not replacing an Asian character the way Scarlett Johansson is. Okay, right? Yeah, nothing like that. When I saw that trailer, I was like, I feel like it's weird that she's the only white lady in this whole thing. Yeah. So, maybe this was supposed to be an Asian character. I think this one, Atomic Blonde, it's a Cold War spy thriller. Oh. But it's, if I'm not mistaken, some of the producers of John Wick are involved. Oh, I'm on board. And Charlize Theron plays this British MI6 agent who's sent over to Cold War East Germany right as just in basically the months leading up to the Berlin Wall falling. And she's got to pull off this crazy difficult mission. And of course she gets mixed up in some of the most insane-looking fight sequences I've seen all year in a trailer. And she's doing it all herself, including, I think the trailer opens up with a full 1 minute long take of Charlize Theron just mowing through these guys completely hand-to-hand, not even with any like guns or anything. Improvised weapons. It's like Bourne Identity meets John Wick meets Death Proof, essentially.
And
that is what we've been waiting for.
Yes, yeah. So, and the movie's coming out in August. It just had its premiere at South by Southwest last week.
How did the reviews go?
The reviews were apparently like through the roof. People were saying it's gonna blow everyone's socks off when it comes out this summer. And I'm super excited for it. You know, there's
100% on board.
There's a couple of cool things that came out of South by Southwest, but this is probably the top one for me, especially after what Theron did in Fury
Mad
Road.
Max. Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited.
Yeah. So,
that's amazing.
And it would be really interesting, I think, to do to maybe like even do a retrospective of like looking at Death Proof and then doing a close comparison with Atomic Blonde when it comes out.
100%.
Kind of trying to see what. And maybe that can be like a return guest appearance for you.
Woo!
We'll make sure we go to see it. And
the return of Kate.
Yeah, and we'll see that happen because maybe we have turned a corner. I don't know in the industry where, granted, we're still turning that corner incredibly slowly.
Yeah.
But
there are missing a wheel.
But there are these big movies that are breaking through with women in the lead roles, and and it's women who are taking names and throwing people down flights of stairs. So it's that's kind of an exciting thing to see.
I love it. You know what's funny is one of my closet loves is the Fast and the Furious franchise, which your co-host is also a huge fan of.
He is, yeah.
And that franchise, I would say, had some of the first like regularly employed franchise female action stars in
Michelle
it.
Rodriguez and
Gal Gadot
before
who
she
then
was
went
Wonder
on to
Woman.
become Wonder Woman. R.I.P. that character and Han. I loved both of them so much. And then who was the UFC fighter?
Oh, Ronda Rousey.
No, she went on. She was also in X-Men.
Oh, Gina Carano.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was also in Fast. She was in Fast 6, I want to say.
Yeah, and she was in Deadpool.
Yeah. Oh, Deadpool is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But was she also an X-Men character?
She was playing like a villain character.
In X-Men?
Well, the Deadpool is technically in the X-Men universe.
Right, okay.
Even though, like,
you can tell I'm not a Marvel/DC expert. I'm like, who's where, what?
Nobody blames you because the weird relationship of, like, who owns the rights to which properties still confuses pretty much everyone.
God, okay.
So that, setting that aside. But Gina Carano has been, I don't know if she's still in MMA now, but... She burst onto the scene with a little movie called Haywire. I think that came out in 2011, and it had a surprisingly great cast. It had Ewan McGregor, Michael Fassbender, and it was directed by Steven Soderbergh.
Awesome.
It was one of like a quick little movie that he did. I think that year because he was planning to go on retirement for a little while, and he wanted to like get this concept out the door. And Gina Carano, I think, wowed a lot of people because no one thought that she could carry a movie entirely by herself. Granted, she had a little bit of trouble with some of the dialogue. She didn't really sell the talky scenes, but when she was doing the action stuff, you were stuck on watching her like dominate the frame.
Bringing it full circle, Charlize Theron also going to be in Fate and the Furious.
Oh yeah.
Yes, as the car controlling tech lady. Whatever's happening in that trailer.
With the strange dreadlocks.
Which she's definitely going to get shit for because white people need to stop wearing dreadlocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And looking a little bit towards the TV side of things too, we are seeing some interesting female characters on Iron Fist. Now, Iron Fist has a whole raft of problems. Jason and I talked about that in the previous episode.
Okay.
But most of those problems have to do with the lead character and how kind of petulant and annoying he is. And actually, the fight scenes in that, even though it's a show entirely based around martial arts, the fight scenes actually take a big drop-off in quality compared to Daredevil, which has truly amazing.
Jessica Jones is also amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems like Marvel is actually doing a better job with their female characters in their Netflix TV series.
That's definitely one Marvel franchise I got 100% behind.
Yeah.
Jessica Jones. Actually, we should really give Jessica Jones a shout out for being an awesome female heroine.
Yeah.
Super cool, super real.
Complicated.
Yeah. Three-dimensional human being. That's all we're asking for. We just want women to be three-dimensional along with the boys.
But now, maybe as like a final little word on Death Proof, is there something, if you were to find someone who, they weren't super experienced with Tarantino movies and you were recommending Death Proof to them, what would you ask them to really look for the first time they watch it to get the most out of it?
Well, I definitely wouldn't do it again to our friend Jenna, who is not a fan of violent movies. I made her watch Death Proof with us. So first of all, I would make sure they're actually into action movies and can handle blood, because that was the first mistake I made. She's like super feminist, so I was like, "You're gonna love Death Proof," and she was horrified. She was like, I'm never watching a movie with you ever again.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'd say, like, all eyes on Zoe Bell. I would tell them, when you watch Zoe Bell, that woman is legit. She's literally doing the things that you see on screen. So, respect. And I would tell them to watch for the ways in which the women interact with each other. You're going to find it to be super naturalistic. And you know what? Kudos to Kurt Russell, because he plays, to a hilarious extent, and a super scary extent, a really good, insecure man. Like, he is not afraid to be extremely flawed on camera. You know, like, his character is awkward. He's weird. He's comical in the end. You know, at the end when they're pulling him out of the car and he's crying for his mother, pretty much, you know, the bloody arm and stuff, he is, you know, you just love to hate that guy. And you also weirdly feel bad for him sometimes, because he's clearly developed some sort of inferiority complex. You know, he's going through his movies at the bar with Rose McGowan's character, or his television shows that he worked on. No one knows what he ever worked on. He was 30 feet from stardom, basically.
Yeah.
And he's washed up and he's insecure.
Yeah.
I would also look for that brilliant performance, because he's the one killer in an exploitation movie that I think also comes out as very well-rounded and justifiably dead at the end of it.
So what I think we need you to do is we need to get you in the same room as Tarantino, and we need to sit you two down, and you need to, like, first of all, we need to find a way to make him stop talking, because he has a habit of talking over. He has a habit of, yeah, something, I don't know. Just, like, make him take you seriously, and just have you set him straight, because I think he's off on a little bit of a weird filmmaking tangent right now.
Like, Quentin, you have got to stop calling Death Proof your worst movie ever made.
Yeah.
It's not, by a long shot. Django is. and you really have to recognize what you might have accidentally done without realizing it with Death Proof, which was create a kick-ass movie with kick-ass women that was inspirational for at least one 18-year-old girl who was watching it in the movie theater when she was with her boyfriend at the time.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to close it out. I hope a few people listening to this will take your advice and maybe reevaluate their ranking of Tarantino movies. But thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah.
I hope I can come back.
Absolutely.
And hey to Jay.
Yeah.
I'm way over in Vancouver. Miss you, buddy.
All right.
Yay, Kate.
Yay, transition.
So, Rob, I was creeping you on Letterboxd the other day, and I saw that you gave Gangs of New York, which is one of my top 50 favorite films, and you gave it 4.5 stars out of 5. And I'm just a little curious why it wasn't a 5-star film for you. Like, what was missing? What was lacking? What didn't you like?
Yeah, I mean, I struggled with my rating on this one more than I expected, because, you know, just for the sake of context, you know, I'm generally pretty receptive to Martin Scorsese. Like, I like pretty much everything he's done.
Were you going up or lower?
I think when I first logged it on Letterboxd, I started at about 4.5, where it currently is, and then I thought about it a bit more, and I'm like, did I really like it that much? And I knocked it back to a 4. But then I changed it again. I was like, no, I actually did like it a little bit more.
It's tough, eh?
So 4.5, and I stayed at 4.5. And I think some of the reasoning I had was that, you know, first and foremost, he shot it at the Cinecittà Studios in Rome and put so much detail into the production design.
Yes. Production design is incredible.
Like, at no point in that film do you feel like you're looking at stuff that was shot on a set. Like, you'd swear that they came across some sort of abandoned mid-19th century village somewhere that had been perfectly preserved, and they just were able to shoot there. So that immersion is pretty important. But I think one thing about it was that it's got that classic Scorsese length. that epic.
Yeah, it's
like,
overly long. Yeah.
That epic 2.5 hour thing, which sometimes sometimes it works for him, and other times you feel like he's having an issue killing his babies, to use the industry phrase, and separating himself from like the scenes that don't really need to be there.
Because I think there are quite a few.
And I think the other thing that, even though DiCaprio is overall pretty good in the role, I wasn't super convinced by his progression to being the revolutionary or the rebel against the norm that he eventually becomes. Like he seems so comfortable as Daniel Day-Lewis's second in command for so long, and then almost out of nowhere in that big party scene at about the 2 hour mark, he finally goes ahead with his assassination plot and is stopped, and then there's some transitions and stuff, and like the Cameron Diaz character is nursing him back to health and all this stuff. And then the next time we see him, he's like a committed, he's dedicated against Daniel Day-Lewis's gang and building up a body of support behind him, Yeah,
it's definitely not Leo's best work, but Daniel Day-Lewis, on the other hand, oh my God, he's amazing, huh?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like I think just the amount of craft that he puts into his role, I think that's what made me bring it back up to a 4 and 4.5 from the 4 after I kind of I waffled on it a bit.
This is kind of like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, where really one performance elevates the entire film. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like you, like I really like Gangs of New York, and I gave it 4 out of 5. But there were the love triangle subplot I just didn't buy, and I don't care for it. And I thought Cameron Diaz was probably the weakest link of the 3 leads. The other thing was too, like, I'm with you, like, this is not Leo's best work, and I don't think Amsterdam Valen, the guy he plays, is a fully fleshed out character. There's some things he does that seem sort of convenient. Like he does it just to move the movie further along.
He almost feels like a patchwork character of like multiple historical people. Like he doesn't feel like his own guy.
But again, the production value is excellent because it ties into this whole history and era of New York that I think had been previously forgotten. But I was also curious. The first big fight scene with Liam Neeson and Daniel Day-Lewis? Did you find the editing in that really hard to follow?
I did, and it was editing, like the film was cut by Thelma Schoonmaker, who's been Scorsese's go-to editor for decades now. But the editing that she used in that sequence, it felt like the kind of editing that from like a much younger filmmaker, like a more experimental kind of cutting, almost like what David O. Russell was doing in Three Kings, like these like super fast motion sequences with rapid fire cuts and like shaky cam.
I think Ridley Scott had the same problem too.
Yeah, and it felt out of character for Scorsese. I mean, not to say that he should stick with a particular look and feel every time he makes a movie.
No, but the film has a lot of wide shots, a lot of pans, a lot of static camera movement. And so the beginning really throws you into it. But like upon multiple viewings, it kind of doesn't fit with the rest of the film.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and the ending too. I hate how the ending brought you to the present. You know, that lasting shot, and they had that U2 soundtrack, and they showed you how like the weeds and all this other stuff had kind of grown and covered the graves, and they're kind of like this lost generation of Americans. I don't know how I feel about that. I always felt that it was a little cliched, a little too mainstream, if you call it that.
Do you think that's the influence of Harvey Weinstein? Because he...
Maybe.
There's a lot of rumors and speculation about Weinstein and Scorsese's relationship when they were making that film, and some people have blown it. Some people have blown it up to be more than it probably was. They made it like at the time there were accounts of like how they were screaming at each other in the edit suite, and they couldn't agree on a cut, and then they kind of smoothed things over, and in later interviews suggested that they were best friends. But it does like. It is made like the ending is mainstream enough that it almost feels like something that Weinstein came along and said like, hey, we gotta make sure that those middle Americans that I care so much about will actually get what you're saying with this fast forward to the present.
Because it was such a self-contained story, right? It was about Amsterdam Allen coming into his own as a man and then avenging his dad. Which, I mean, spoiler alert, he eventually does. But at the same time, it really branched out in sort of like 4 or 5 different directions.
It goes into a lot of stuff with the Tammany Hall segments, you know, the Jim Broadbent character, who's this corrupt local politician, and getting Brendan Gleeson's character elected to be the sheriff to represent the Irish vote. It built, and those were they were segments that weren't out of place, but they also really did contribute to the runtime.
Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it, because it's between that and There Will Be Blood. I think Daniel Day-Lewis already clinches the title of best actor of our generation.
And we'll have to see now what he's going to bring to this new collaboration with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yes,
I think he's
the
playing
diva.
A guy who works in the clothing industry in 1950s London, which you know, those two together with a topic that probably hasn't been featured in movies all that much. You know, that could be pretty cool stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
I think that's all the time we have for this one, Rob.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground, and hopefully we'll get to... There's a lot of news, and it was good to sit down with Kate for that big discussion about Death Proof, and hoping to have some more special guests on the show in the coming episodes. But until the next episode, my name is Robert Snow in Toronto.
And I'm Jason Chen in Vancouver. Be sure to check out kinetoscope.ca for more film and TV, and we'll talk to you next time.